Welcome back to the Nighttime Chronicles. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on that bell to get notifications. I hope you guys are having a great night. For today's stories, I have 2 scary camping tales for you guys to enjoy. Let's begin. Number 1, the lake. This was a creepy experience I had with my friends last fall while camping. Before our college semester really kicked off, the 6 of us decided to take a last-minute camping trip 4 hours north of Seattle to Canada, to a lake we saw on Google Maps. Our plan was to get there on Thursday evening and stay until Sunday evening. We carpooled into one Jeep ready to go. When we finally got to our destination, we were now deep into the secluded woods of British Columbia, where we settled near the small lake, with 3 tents for the 6 of us. The first night was when things started to become a little creepy. We would hear footsteps that sounded like they were wet, bare feet running around our tents. At first, we thought it was just one of us playing tricks on the group, but we quickly realized it wasn't, as we poked our heads out of the tents and saw no one around. The second day in the afternoon is when things got scary. One of the guys and I went fishing on the dock, which was not far from the campsite. While fishing, we saw what looked like an alligator with a ton of algae on its back, floating towards us. My friend and I took a step back, startled by it, but then realizing that there weren't any types of animals like that here, we took a closer look at it. Just for a second, we swore it was a rotting body of a woman floating on her back, with her head tucked down to her chin and her long hair floating on top of the water. We both did a double take, and before we could get a better look, the figure dove deep into the lake. We ran back to camp after that and told the others what we saw. They laughed and told us that all we saw was a big beaver that had accumulated a lot of algae and gunk on its back. My friend and I calmed down and continued with the rest of the day. When night came, we were all gathered around the campfire, hanging out and telling scary stories. But then we heard something make a big splash, as if someone had jumped into the lake. We didn't think of it much, but again, we heard another big splash, curious. We followed the noise, which was coming from the direction of the dock. As we were approaching, we heard something. Footsteps sprinting on the dock and a leap into the water, hearing the same big splash from before. We couldn't see the dock yet since there were tall marsh grasses blocking the view. We hurried to take a look, and once we did, we saw a lady slowly emerging out of the water next to the dock. She looked exactly like what my friend and I saw earlier that afternoon. As she emerged, she pointed and laughed at us. At that point, we all booked it back to our campsite and into our tents. That whole night, all we heard was the same big splash going over and over again. Once it was bright enough out, everyone came out of their tents. No one had gotten any sleep. We all were shaken up, quickly packed everything, and ended our camping trip early. A while later, I was curious about that lake, so I did some research. It turns out that a cult had sacrificed a lady that was solo camping in the area. The sacrifice was held in the water where that dock was built. I believe that ghost was pointing and laughing at us because it was mocking our friends for doubting what we saw. Since that day, everyone that attended the camping trip was now a believer in the paranormal. Number 2, creature. I remember that night in the woods like it was yesterday. 3 of us, Jake, Sarah, and I, decided to embark on a camping trip to the Appalachian Mountains. Little did we know, our innocent adventure would soon turn into a nightmarish encounter with the supernatural. We arrived at our chosen campsite just before sundown. We sat up our tents and gathered firewood. As the darkness enveloped us, we sat around the crackling fire, sharing stories and laughter. Sometime after midnight, we noticed an eerie silence come upon the forest. The once chirping birds fell silent, and the rustling leaves stopped. Jake and Sarah exchanged anxious glances, mirroring the unease I felt deep in my gut. Just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, a faint cry carried on the wind, sending shivers down our spines. There was a voice, low and haunting, seemingly coming from all directions at once. calling,
"Help!"
We decided to investigate the source of the voice, as it could have been a cry for help. Armed with just our flashlights, we ventured deeper into the woods, following the disembodied whispers. The dense foliage seemed to close in around us, making it hard to see the path. We finally stumbled upon an old cabin that looked like your typical Hollywood horror cabin, hidden deep within the forest. The mere sight of it sent my heart racing, almost causing me a heart attack. Despite our instinct to flee, the thought of someone in need of help was greater. As we entered the cabin, the air was thick with a smell of decay. There were strange symbols scribbled on the walls. I'm sure we felt as though we had entered the lair of an otherworldly creature. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through and broke the windows, extinguishing our flashlights. There was complete darkness. It left us vulnerable to whatever lurked around. Panic set in as we fumbled in the darkness. Then we heard a growl from the darkest corner of the room. It was a pair of glowing eyes materializing. It stared at us with an insatiable hunger. As our eyes adjusted, we could clearly see what the creature was. It was a skinwalker. Its presence filled the room, suffocating us with dread. At that moment, our survival instincts kicked in. We fled from the cabin, running deep into the forest. But as we turned back, Jake was not with us, but we could see the skinwalker pursuing us. Its howls pierced through the night. Sarah and I somehow managed to find our way back to our campsite. I shouted to her that I had my keys, and we both ran into my car. We drove away as fast as we could. The haunting cries of the skinwalker echoed behind us. We reported what happened to the local police, and they guided us back to the campsite, where we were able to locate the same cabin. As we entered the cabin, the police searched everywhere for Jake, but there was no trace of Jake or the skinwalker anywhere. To this very day, Sarah and I feel regretful for not going back to get Jake, and always wondered what would have happened if we did. Could we have saved him? Would we have disappeared just like Jake? We will never know. But I can hear Jake crying for help in my dreams, begging us to go back to save him. Thank you for listening to the Nighttime Chronicles. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and tell us what other types of stories you guys might enjoy. See you guys in the next video.